good morning. And I'm sitting outdoors today and I'm loving the feel. I'm in New Delhi. The weather here is fantastic. As you can see behind me, there are these lovely greens and it's fantastic. So we're sitting outside and taking in all the oxygen, fill the lungs. That's one of the things one needs to do in times of COVID is to spend time outdoors, take in fresh air, lots of oxygen, look after yourself. So viewers, welcome once again to another series of Dekho Apna Desh webinars. Thank you so much for supporting us for so many weeks and months as we go along the beautiful journey of discovering incredible India. And today, the subject that we are bringing to you is so different and so pretty and so gentle and beautiful in so many ways. Birds in India. The birds that are born here and live here, the domestic birds, and birds that come from thousands and thousands of miles, the Siberian cranes, and of course, the specialist with us today is going to tell you who comes from where and becomes the guest in India. So we literally become Atiti Deva Bhav, even for the birds. Isn't that so fascinating? Well, introducing to us the subject today of birds in India is Saurabh Sawant. Saurabh, welcome to Dekho Apna Desh.
Thank you
It's a
so much.
pleasure to have you with us. And Saurabh has been educated as an engineer. And these are the kind of stories that fascinate us viewers because Saurabh is an engineer by education, could have done the typical 9 to 5 or a 9 to 9 actually, dry job anywhere, but he started going out bird watching. He started going out into very different terrains, and gradually, how it turned into a passion, turned into a profession, is such a wonderful story, which also I'm sure Saurabh shall be telling us about. Saurabh is now a naturalist, a wildlife photographer, and a filmmaker. He runs the Tethys Creation and Expeditions and specializes in nature and wildlife tourism. He's also the recipient of the prestigious Carl Zeiss Conservation Award in 2015. Pleasure to have you with us, Saurabh. And I was talking to him, and he's been around the world. He's also been to the Ivy League school, the Cornell University, and he's learned a lot of the tricks of the trade, so to say, from the masters themselves. So it's such a pleasure to have Indians go all over the world, bring the best talent from all over, develop things within themselves, and then come back and add value to our own ecosystem. That's what it is also about, Atmanirbhar Bharat. That's about being proud Indian and doing so many things for your country. We will, of course, talk about all that, but for now, Saurabh, the web stage, the web screen is all yours. So let's go birding.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a kind introduction. And let me just share my screen and start with it.
The picture itself is so fascinating, Saurabh. We would love to know where is this picture from before we even start the webinar.
Yeah. So this picture is taken near a place called Latpanchar in West Bengal, very close to Mahananda Wildlife Sanctuary. And this is a pair of rufous-necked hornbills. The male is on the right-hand side with the all rufous-colored neck and nape, and it's the other one is the female, and they're sort of in courtship. So the male is feeding, is trying to lure the female as such. And what's special with the hornbills is hornbills they nest, they're cavity nesters, so they nest in tree cavities, and the females they go inside the cavity and just stay there. They will just so usually the holes or the slits are very thin, and they will cover it up with their poop and other material, and they will shed all their feathers, and then with their legs and the chicks they will raise the chicks. And throughout this entire period the male goes out, forages and keeps feeding the females and the chicks throughout. Then when the chicks are actually about to fly, they will the female will break open the door or the window that they've put up, and then it will come out from. So this is from West Bengal. And
Absolutely. But does the Hornbill Festival derive its name from this beautiful bird?
yes, it does, because in especially in northeast, in Arunachal and in Nagaland, the hornbills traditionally have a very important place in the culture and the folklore and all those things. So
Oh,
traditionally, they are very important, and they that's how the festival gets its name.
fascinating. Well, carry on, please.
So we'll start with just learning about Indian birds. What are Indian birds, and how many of them are there, and what all variety is there really. So there are many birds. The diversity is really great in India. There are from common myna, which is really common, probably the most abundant bird in the country, to the Geridon's courser, which is probably the rarest in the country, which is only found in very tiny patches, recorded from very tiny patches in Andhra Pradesh. It's also a nocturnal bird, uh, and then from the smallest to the largest. So there is a warbler on the left hand side, a leaf warbler, which is probably about between some just 10 to 20 centimeters from the beak tip to the tail tip. And the largest flying bird, the tallest flying bird in the world, the Saras crane, which is quite common in the north. If you go to the fields around Delhi and Uttar Pradesh and Haryana, these are commonly seen in the fields, in usually in such pairs. From the very nondescript pale-billed flower pecker, which is all drab brown, and on the right-hand side you can see the Indian roller, which has beautiful shades of blue and lilac, with streaking on the throat. So we have all kinds of birds, and there is they are also found in all kinds of habitats throughout India. From in the desert, you can see the desert courser, and even in the dense forest, the really tiny spotted wren babbler. Uh, so which has also has a very beautiful song. So we have all kinds of birds in all kinds of varied habitats that are seen in India. So, out of the world's about approximately 11,000 species, India has almost 1,335 species. This number varies based on the taxonomy you follow or the scientific, uh, advancement. As it happens, there could be less birds, number of birds, or more number of species. Out of which 78 species are only found in India. So out of these 1,335, which is roughly about, say, 11-12% of birds of the world, 78 are not found anywhere else on the planet but in India. And in the Indian subcontinent, just in the subcontinent, that number is even higher. During the last 400 years, almost 80 species have gone extinct in the world. Uh, Globally threatened species are 1,100, out of which 180 species are in India. Uh, so that's quite a huge number when we are talking about just 1,300 species of birds. Uh, there is effort going on to make the situation better, but it is still not enough. What are there are probably extinct species in India. The two that I can think of are mountain quail, which is also called as the Himalayan quail, which is only recorded somewhere around maybe 100 years back, from Uttarakhand, and the pink-headed duck, which used to be found in the northeast in the plains, in pools and wetlands. Verge of extinction, the Jadon's courser I showed you, that's probably the only one of the two or three pictures that are there available for this bird. And one of them is a camera trap picture, as it is only mostly active during the night, and it's very elusive and a very rare bird. So there are very few pictures of it. So that's the Jadon's courser, which is probably on the verge of extinction. There is Great Indian Bustard, which is also very endangered. It's critically endangered, and probably only about uh, 300 to 500 birds are left in the wild in India. It's also found in Pakistan, but Pakistan, they the hunting ban or the hunting ban implementation is not so great. And the white-billed heron, which is found in the foothills and the hill river systems in the northeast, and in Bhutan. What you see in this picture is a black-necked crane, which is found about beyond 4,000 meters, very high up in the Trans Himalayas, beyond the Himalayas. This is a picture taken in Sokar, which is in Ladakh, just close, just where you climb up from Rotang Pass to Kelong, and then you reach Sokar there. So birds have always been part of, not just Indian, but all human culture. So what you see here is the Garuda, the Vahana of Lord Vishnu, which is probably it's thought to be the Brahmini kite, which you can see on the picture in the right. Uh, then the Vahana of goddess Lakshmi, the owl, or Lord Kartikeya, the peacock, or the birds in mythology and our epics, like the Jatayu in Ramayana, which is thought to be a griffin vulture. And of course, as I was saying, it has always inspired all human imagination. It has inspired art and culture. So, right from Mughal paintings of beautiful birds to scriptures about Baznama and falconry in the Mughal times. And you can see in the center here, a bird is drawn on the wall. So, right from the cave paintings to the modern art and literature, birds have always inspired human imagination. And in the North India, as I was just talking about Saras cranes are part of many North Indian folklores. One, because they're quite common and they're seen around villages and humans. They live quite nicely around human habitations. They have become a symbol in our folklore of the fidelity, because the Saras cranes, they mate for life. So, in fact, in Gujarat, there is a saying where the newlyweds are blessed in a sense that you can just stay like a pair of Saras. So you bless them like that. So things like that are there, very much embedded in our culture. And of course, the great hornbill that you can see, from which we just spoke about the Hornbill Festival. So the hornbills have in the Northeast, they're part of traditional tribal culture. In fact, there is the earlier times when they used to hunt these hornbills and solely they were dependent on hunting and gathering. The hornbill cask used to be the headgear for the village headman. So all these things are there. We have so much diversity. How we can, as people who are interested in tourism, how we can tap into it. So birding is a global hobby. It's one of the topmost hobbies in the world. Uh, what you do in birding is just a recreational activity where you go out and observe birds. It doesn't take much. All it takes is probably just a pair of binoculars and maybe a field guide and a sketch book or a pen and a notebook where you can just make notes so that you can identify. But now that has been replaced by all the cameras and other documentation gear. So it involves mainly identifying birds and understanding their behavior, or looking at their colors and getting fascinated with how they behave, how they walk, how they sing, and all those things. So it is often said that birding is your lifetime ticket to the theater of nature. So you can, when you watch birds, the first thing that comes to my mind is birds are just everywhere, right? From my backyard, if to anywhere you go. Even even if I'm say traveling by trains or buses, even if I'm in urban setups, the birds are always there. There are sparrows, there are mynas, and you can always observe them, and you'll always find something fascinating about them. In fact, sparrow has also been now declared as the state bird of Delhi. So why do we really watch birds? Because one, birds have tremendous variety. Birds are one of the most diverse group of animals. They are found all the way from the Arctic to the Antarctic, and in the desert, in the highest of the hills, there are birds which fly over the Himalayas, over the Mount Everest, and migrate. uh, Something like the bar-headed goose is known to fly over 40,000 feet in height. So you can imagine the kind of diversity that they have. All the birds that you can see here are from different varied habitats. They have different habits, they have different shapes and colors and sizes. They have different feeding habits. They feed on different kinds of things. They live in different areas as per elevation. Some of them are from the desert, some of them from the hills, some of them live on the coast. There are also the birds which are pelagic, and and just mostly spend all their life in the sea. So they have uh, extremely tremendous variety all over the world. And again, what fascinates us mostly is the colors that the birds have. What you can see here is the Himalayan monarch, and of course, our national bird, the peafowl. Then there is a trogon, that's a pitta, and that's the red jungle fowl, which is the but this is the wild one, which is the ancestor to our all domestic chicken. And this is a very tiny bird, the sunbird. It's a crimson sunbird. So the colors that you can find in the bird world are probably only matched or contended in the probably just under the sea. So this is something that I think fascinates kids and old alike. Of course, for the love of flight, I'm sure whenever man saw a bird, that that's the time it really started dreaming about if I could fly. And that's how I think planes came, gliders came, and slowly those things happened. So as much as I can imagine, man is always interested in flight. And the music is what connects and binds all of us. And who knows who are the best singers in the world? It's just the birds. The birds can sing varied kinds of songs, and it's something that it's very soulful for most humans. And of course, the fascinating behavior. What you can see here is the Baya weaver. Weaver because it weaves its nest, a strand by strand, a blade by blade. And what you can see, the males, what this is the male on the left, the males, they weave the nest. And once it's halfway through, the females come and check out the nest. And only if they like the work, if they like the craftsmanship of the male, then they would agree to, nest with that male. So the males keep on practicing their and honing their craft, and they would go on and on making these nests year and year on. So these kind of behaviors are there are varied kinds of behaviors in birds, right from the weaver to the birds of paradise that you may have seen on the Discovery Channel or the National Geographic, and the kind of dances they do, the kind of courtship displays they put on. It's just magnificent. And of course, the birds are everywhere. Wherever you go, you don't need to do anything very specific for looking out for birds. Even if you just peep out of your window, if you keep your ears open, you will always find birds around you. There are parakeets around us. There are black kites. There are koels. As soon as it's Feb and March, you can always hear koels singing. There are bulbuls. There are tailor birds. Even if uh, I'm I I remember my favorite pastime as a kid used to be, try to listen to a tailor bird, and then once I spotted it, to just follow it up around, and eventually you will find it going to a nest or just disappearing in a bush. And if you just go and very secretly just try to look around and go close to the bush, you would always find its nest, which is like a sort of a conical shaped nest made with leaves which are tailored by the tiny bird using cobweb and making threads out of it. And then it puts its cushion inside with silk cotton and cobwebs and things like that. And then it lays its eggs in there. And that's how it gets its name, the tailor bird. Of course, there are lapwings, there are egrets all around us. There are different kinds of doves and pigeons and owlets. In Mumbai, where I come from. Barn owls are pretty common around in the cities, and but you almost never see them. And suddenly, one of these days, if you just around dusk, if you try to look around in the night, you'll always find them flying around just around the buildings and apartments. And they are the greatest control over our rat population everywhere, and also insects. So birds are everywhere. They provide us a great understanding about our own world. The more we know about how the birds are doing, they are very good natural indicators. So the more we know about how the birds are doing, how their populations are increasing or decreasing. We know our world better now. I think all of us are always dreading with uh, all the pollution, this, that. Oh my God, what kind of air are we breathing? What kind of water are we drinking? Whether we are getting fresh oxygen or not. A lot of us are having breathing problems everywhere. So I think birds, if we keep looking at them and if we understand what is happening to them, we will understand our own world better, and we will, if we try to conserve and protect them, eventually we will benefit ourselves only. It also sharpens our senses. Birds, uh, you have to make an effort sometimes to watch birds. So your ears become more sensitive, your nose becomes more sensitive, your eyes become more sensitive. You have to walk, you have to climb. Of course, that is when you go to a forest and try to become a hardcore birder. There are many things that you need to do, and it definitely helps. And of course, there is now myriad of literature which is there to uh, prove, or as an evidence, that how much nature benefits our health. They're thinking of, in Europe, in many countries, they're thinking of including nature education as a part of regular curriculum, and think considering that the health benefits and other benefits, mental benefits that it has. So that is there with birds. Definitely give you that. And of course, talking about tourism, it's I think one of the top most hobbies in the world, and it's $1 billion industry globally. This is just the figure in US, which is the direct and indirect output of birding uh, as a tourism, as a bird-based tourism. So this is $107 billion industry. To talk about a few things, and this is quite actually old data. We don't have a lot of data from other places in the world. This is, I think, from 2011, where $41 billion were annually spent on birding just in the United States. And there's been a 287% growth from 82 to 2009 in bird viewing or bird photography. 20 million US citizens took up birding trips between 2005 to 2009, and a lot of them are actually also traveling to India and other places in South Asia and Southeast Asia. Of course, Africa has always been on the wildlife tourism map of the world. Just in the tiny country of UK, this $500 million spent annually. So you can imagine the kind of, and these figures are old, and these are really, I think, you know, uh, not up to the not the real figures. I'm sure this is much bigger than that, as more and more uh, advent is happening in photography and videography and social media, and people are traveling more. These figures have grown by a lot now.
Yeah, sort of, in fact, picking from the point that you just mentioned about mental health and also learning so many things, I must add here, viewers, that we are in fact going to do a webinar with a psychologist who actually, not only in normal times, but in post COVID times, is particularly going to talk on the benefits of stepping out of your home, connecting and reconnecting with nature, and spending time just, with everything that brings us back with a lot of confidence that life is beautiful and it goes on. So I think that these are some very important and intrinsic learnings. And that's why they say when you travel, when you go out to another place, you don't just go there and spend time. You actually come back with so many positive memories. And that's what tourism is all about. So I'm glad you touched that point, Saurabh.
Thank
Sorry to
you.
come in on that.
No,
Yeah.
thank you. So, in fact, I was talking to a few journalists a week back or so, and also a lot of people, they took up birding. I even made a short film here about just the birds of Mumbai, which was liked, and also a lot of people learned about the species that they can just see around their houses. In the COVID times, I think a lot of people took up birding just because they were at home. There was nothing much to do. I think all Netflix and Prime was over, and there were not new no new films coming in. The television filming was shut. So I think a lot of people took up birding, and they haven't gone back. I think they have been much happier And I think if you take up birding or if you are out in the nature, it's very difficult to be, depressed or sad. And I think a webinar like where a psychologist can reiterate that, I think it will be amazing. Thank you. So, talking about India, so now this is the global overview of what birding industry is like. Talking about India, India has a huge potential that I believe is still quite untapped. So if you, this is just a species richness. That means how many species are found in which country. So out of 11,000 odd species, you can say the Colombia is at the top with 1,800 species. Then India is up at the number 8. So you can imagine, and all these countries above us, except Indonesia, are in South America, and they have a huge birding tourism industry there. A lot of people from United States, they go to South America every year to watch birds, and very few actually go beyond that step and come to India or other South Asian countries or in Southeast Asia. So I think we have a huge potential that we need to tap. Then these are some of the other stats that we have: 1339 species recorded on eBird, which is like a bird sighting repository. It's a portal that all eBirders use. That birders put up their life lists. If they go to a particular location, they put up a checklist on what birds were seen, and they do their counts of birds. Like, okay, I saw 2 house sparrows or 3 jungle crows and things like that, and they make checklists and they put it up there, which is also not just used for your own life list, which is the all the checklist of a kind of birds that they've seen, but it's also big science nowadays. uh, it is used to understand the migration patterns, to understand the abundance of birds, where the birds are declining and where they are increasing, and things like that. So West Bengal tops with 867 species in India, followed by Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, which has pristine forests, and of course these are the areas where the bird diversity is much higher. West Bengal, because West Bengal is a very unique state with also the coast and the higher Himalayas, all the way up to Darjeeling, and right from Sundarbans to Darjeeling, they have all kinds of varied habitats. So they have a very high number of species. You can see Kerala is very well birded with a lot of checklists that birders have put up, and followed by Tamil Nadu and Karnataka and Maharashtra. So you can imagine that still lot of places there needs to be more and more birding happening, and so that we can generate a lot of data and understand what birds are where, and tap into it. This is the heat map where by the species richness, how many species are observed in which areas. So you can see that throughout the Himalayas, the species are in high numbers, and in the Western Ghats, where the species are in high numbers. These are also the regions where the endemism, that means there are species which are only found in these particular areas and not anywhere else on the planet, is quite high. So how do we do this? What is birding tourism going to really offer? So, more or less, most of the nature or wildlife tourism in India is concentrated um, at tiger reserves. So people usually go out on these jungle safaris, and they would get, get into a jeep, and they do a 3 hour 4 hour ride and come back, and they would of course watch tigers, which is a brilliant and magnificent thing to experience. uh, and they would maybe watch other animals. There could be gores and leopards and this and that, but tigers unfortunately are not everywhere. Not all states have tigers, or they do have the infrastructure to, or the geographic terrain to actually promote tiger tourism. So there are tigers of course in Arunachal as well, but it's very difficult to go to Arunachal and have a jeep safari and watch a tiger, like how you can do in maybe Madhya Pradesh or Rajasthan. So how we can really tap into all these natural areas where people only go and just look at maybe the monuments, or maybe just the culture, or meet a few people, just go to a lodge and relax. Uh, so the answer is hidden in birds. Birds, as I said, are everywhere. If you get interested, you can find them yourself, or you can have nature guides, and they can show you. And it takes a lifetime to complete 1,300 species of birds. So uh, so once you reach maybe 800 or 900 species that you have seen, it takes, great effort. You have to go to very far off places, and keep make an effort to watch these birds. So your tourism never ends. So birding is basically something which is very easy to get into, because all it needs is probably just a pair of binoculars and a willingness to just look through it. So it becomes a stepping stone for nature tourism. Once you're interested in birding and you start going to all these different places, you go to Gujarat and you go to Arunachal Pradesh or Kashmir, you slowly start looking at other things also. You start looking at mammals, you start looking at plants, you start looking at tiny flowers, and butterflies, and insects and caterpillars and spiders, whatever the birds are. So when you're not watching birds, you're there in the forest relaxing, or you're there in the uh, uh, other different habitats, and you start looking at other things. So it becomes a stepping stone for nature tourism, which is quite easy to get into.
Saurabh, if I were to ask you that in all your forays to these different locations, how has been the amenities around staying, and how would you put safety? And I'm asking particularly from the point of view of a lone traveler or a woman traveler. What are your experiences in India?
Fortunately, I have never come across any bad experiences in India. And even in the remotest places, in the northeast or in the Western Ghats, or up north in Kashmir, all experiences have been pretty good. Safety wise, it is, you have to do some research before you go to any place. Uh, so northeast is really really safe for women, uh, and so is Western Ghats, uh, because I've had many friends and researcher friends who have been working in the Northeast, alone, just with their team, and they have always been safe. They have always given good reviews about everywhere. But of course, there are places where things can go wrong. So you have to always do some research and try not to get into the uh, dicey places, or dicey situations. And if you're a good traveler, you can I think you can always avoid that. So overall, security wise, birding has always given me experiences which are safe and secure. I don't think there has always anywhere been issues as such. But yeah, things go wrong. There have been instances where people have been mugged, or things have of that sort have
I mean, but
happened.
that can happen to anyone anywhere. And
Yes,
normally, when
yes,
we step
correct,
out of our home, even to go to our everyday workplaces, I mean, we do take normal precautions of,
correct. Yes,
planning and making sure that you don't do anything irresponsible or stupid.
yes,
Is
definitely.
obviously part of that. And also, perhaps taking a local along would be a good idea if you know people there, somebody who can actually, and it also adds to a lot more of the experience because that's how you see the local foods, you see the local customs, you see their songs and the dance forms and whatnot. So I think that just enhances the whole experience so much. Sort of also, what is the kind of stay arrangements? Particularly, I'm asking in the context of the homestays and the small little options that are there. Because a lot of people, when they go to this part of India, that interior hinterland, want to experience India in its very authentic form. So, how has your experience been?
So, in terms of amenities and stay, India is, I think, that Atithi Devo Bhava is there in all of us. It's embedded. And there are places where there is absolutely nothing, that there is no stay arrangements, there is no tourism infrastructure. But if you can manage it, if you can adjust, there are always people who can, who will welcome you, and give you space, and to sleep, and feed you. And my experience has always been nice. Of course, now that people are traveling more, even in the remotest villages in the northeast, there would be, you would always find at least a homestay or something. And if locally by NGOs or by local government bodies, usually they are quite well trained to provide basic amenities and provide that service that a traveler would need. There are places where you can't find anything, but most of them have good services. And of course, I've been to places like Far East in Kibithu, where there is, you can just be very close to China border in Walong, in Nanjao district in Arunachal Pradesh. Then in Sikkim, again close to borders, in Himachal. And if not, there are always, rest houses. There are army areas which you can always get help from, in terms of at least if you're stranded or stuck. But otherwise, it has been safe. You'll always find a place. Of course, you have to adjust it. It's not always. It's way basic most of the time. It's not luxurious. But birders, I think the motivation to get rare birds and to watch uh, brilliant birds is so much that they are ready to adjust with everything. So if you can do that, I think, and most trekkers or most adventure people who are into adventure
Mm.
tourism, they do that all the time. And I would urge, in fact, them, because in fact trekkers, they reach such places, and adventure people reach such places that most birders don't often go to. And if all of us can, at least become like basic birders, where you would at least look at a bird rather than ignoring it, I think it would be amazing to know what kind of birds are where. And
Absolutely. And I think it's so
yeah.
important, Saurabh, I'm sure you'll agree, because you grew up studying engineering and you were probably just doing a normal, so to say, urban life. But I'm sure you've learned so much, and also stepping out of the comfort zone and learning to coexist with so many beautiful splendors of nature is a learning in itself.
Yes,
And
yes,
I'm sure you would
definitely.
have learned so many other things. You know, when you went birding, you would have learned how to communicate with local communities, how to
Yes.
respect other people's space, other people's customs, the way they live. I think there's just so much to take away and makes you grow as a human. And I'm sure you must have in this journey also sort of met a lot of phenomenal people that have created an impact on you.
Yes, definitely. Because as you were saying earlier, that when you're out there, it is always, as any traveler, it's important to actually, be with local people. uh, Not only they provide you the right information, but it's always safe that way. And to to communicate with them, to ask them how things are, and to learn about their surroundings and where you can go, where you shouldn't go, all those things matter. And they can teach you a lot of things, especially related to their culture, how what they eat, what they drink, how they do it. So, in fact, one of my best experiences have always been the social surveys that I have done with hunters in Arunachal Pradesh or in Nagaland and places like these. You can just if there is a questionnaire, some of them are not willing to answer first, but you can get them to talk, and they would tell you what they have hunted and how they have hunted it, and you can learn from these stories. And some of them are incredible. The way they can track animals, the way they can find animals is just amazing. Not even a trained naturalist or a biologist can do that. The kind of understanding, they may not know the names of those animals or the scientific names, but they know exactly how to find those animals. They can give you insights of those for about those animals that you cannot get even in maybe decades of study. So things like that always happen, and they, of course, the as I said, Atithi Devo Bhava is embedded in us. It's intrinsic
Yes.
to us. So they feed you. When I was working on the Amur Falcon Conservation Project, I was doing these hunter surveys, and the best time to usually meet the hunters used to be in the evening, because they would leave early morning about around 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. For their work in the fields or even for hunting. Now the hunting is really reduced, but then the usual time used to be just around the evening, and in the evening, you can always find them together. So that's also when you can just finish off most of the work. So in Nagaland, for example, they sit in a place called Morang, where there is all the boys come together and sit and drink and all those things. So when you're there, you are supposed to, again, you cannot refuse to drink the local rice beer, or you cannot refuse to drink the eat the pork that they've prepared. And they make excellent food. Some of those things that you get are you have to have an acquired taste for it. Like some of the bamboo shoot rice and these things, they're quite uh, uh, they're quite about acquired taste, but they're amazing once you get the hang of it. They make those bamboo, and one of the uh, very interesting things I found that all over Arunachal there is Bombay duck, which is a local fish from Bombay, which is only found in Bombay and Gujarat, but it's a delicacy there. So I found a lot of dried Bombay duck there. And my friend in Zero in Arunachal Pradesh, he even cooked it for me in the bamboo shoots with chicken and the Bombay duck. So things like that always keep happening, and they're
Yeah, that's
amazing
what cultural
experiences.
exchange. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's what
with
cultural
yeah,
exchange
yeah.
and
So with
so
birding,
much. Mm,
yeah. So with
right,
birding and this kind of tourism, you get a chance to really interact with a lot of
right,
people, and it's
right.
amazing, which you
Before
would
you move
otherwise
on,
not get if you go just like that.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. You know, and while I have nothing against going and staying in proper hotels, but truly, I think tourism and travel is about connecting with local communities. And if you go to a place, and if you just went and stayed in the same standard hotel, which had the same standard bedroom and the same standard bathroom, you probably are losing out on the real time gain of, as sort of just said, finding that a Bombay duck was actually cooked with bamboo, entirely a different experience. And I'm sure when they would travel on to the other sides of India, would find their things done differently. And that's the beauty of India. And we keep working on the Ek Bharat Shesh Bharat concept also a lot, and that's where we encourage all of you to step out of your comfort zones, go travel other parts. People are welcoming, people are warm, the food, the drink, the entire ecosystem is so welcoming. And I think we should definitely, and that's why we are carrying this banner of Dekho Apna Desh, because Saurabh has just touched on the fact that the birds are just so many that you can, finish your lifetime and not having seen enough birds. But that's something I'm saying for India all the time. We are doing our 68th webinar, and we just have so many more concepts to share with you. So I'm just loving this journey, and I'm sure all of you are, and keep supporting us. Saurabh, before you move on, I'm going to ask you that, aren't you going to share with us a couple of bird sounds that you would have acquired and learned?
Sounds I don't have, but I can surely play some. I'll definitely play
You
some.
can you make them?
Oh, I can't. I'm not very good at it. Uh, yeah, yeah. I'm actually terrible at it. But
Okay.
yeah, yeah. uh,
All
so
right. No,
so
carry
moving
on.
on.
Carry on.
Uh, so so uh, so when you're actually a birder, you can get to all these remote destinations to find rare birds, and that is what also opens it up for other tourists and tourism activities, just like trekkers. So where nobody reaches, birders and trekkers can reach. So it becomes just a starting point for tourism activities. And again, then it takes a diversion, from the tourist honeypots, like the tiger reserves or very urban spaces in states apart from the metropolitan cities. So that is a very good benefit of birding tourism, and of course it helps the grassroots economics in remote places. Right from when you are actually birding, it doesn't just help like a homestay or a guide. You have to reach there, so you have to travel to that. So you'll take a flight or a bus or a train, then get there, you'll need a car, so you are actually benefiting a driver, his family. Then you might need somebody local, like a local tour operator who would arrange everything for you. You would need somebody who would cook for you, where you would stay. So the grassroots economic benefits are immense. There are nature guides, there are bird guides. I know of people who used to be just boatmen who would just carry a bunch of people, or bicycles and motorcycles from one end of the river to the other, one side of the river to the other, for maybe merely $10 or $20, but are now kind of booked for an entire year and or two in a row. So these kind of economic benefits are there, and more these things happen. They also have more and more motivation to save the natural spaces around them. So the more you promote these things, more and more tourism infrastructure development can happen. And that happens, it will promote the remote areas and communities more. And it helps them to not depend directly on the natural capital, but use it in a sustainable way and also people benefit from it in terms of tourism. Environmental education can happen right on ground this way, and birding is a great start for it because nothing fascinates kids and people more than birds, and they're easy. They don't take much of an effort or much of equipment and other things. And with this, the monitoring and conservation of natural capital can happen. The more you visit these areas, more people are watching if there is illegal mining happening, illegal logging happening, if there is poaching happening. These things, they help a lot. So what would be my recommendations overall to promote birding tourism in India? Offer what bird watchers require. Bird watchers require not much. They would require safety and security, which is there in most areas in India. Uh, then they would require some very basic amenities. So if we can train, local communities, local people to watch birds and also protect certain areas that has birds, and also run homestays, maybe in driving, in guiding, in cooking, in a particular way that the travelers required. It can uh, boost the local economy as well as attract more and more bird tourists in India and abroad as well. So a lot of people right now come from UK and US, but there are still a few compared to what numbers they have as birders in their countries. Advertise and promote. We need to very specifically promote and advertise birding locations, birding areas, wildlife sanctuaries. We have to know definite locations, very definite sites that we can promote and regulate as birding areas. And also not just maybe social media, but guidebooks, then the TV media, and all other kinds of media that we can think of. We have to advertise and promote birding. Then attend and organize at international events. Nowadays, in last 4 or 5 years, a lot of birding festivals have happened. I've spoken in two birding festivals in UP and in Himachal. Also, now I'll be going to Goa for another one. Birding festivals happen in Gujarat, but I think they have to happen in every state, and every state has to offer something unique about them, so that we can attract more and more foreign tourists as well. Market research is lacking. How many birders are visiting? How many people are interested in wildlife tourism? And those kind of things we need to have solid data on, so that we can uh, engage and we can actually plan, strategize how these things can work out. And of course, collaboration with local bodies, local NGOs, local communities, extremely important. Uh, Environmental awareness is important in people. And with that environmental awareness, I think now that we are facing such environmental crisis, including this pandemic, environmental awareness is going to be one of our biggest worries in the coming times. So that needs to be more and more. And with that, of course, tourism will flourish. The more people are concerned about the environment and nature around them, the more they will travel and see and try to experience and benefit from it. Specialized tours need to be developed, not just birding, but birding can always be clubbed with something very interesting, like meeting local people, attending festivals, having like a food and bird trip together, uh, experiencing the local culture. So all these things can happen together, and such specialized tours, I'm sure, will attract more and more tourists. and emphasize on different species. Many different species are very particular to certain locations, and if we try to emphasize on them that okay, this is our specialty, like a bird is only found in the Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary in Arunachal Pradesh. So that becomes a hotspot for a lot of tourists every year. From all over the world come just for that species there. And of course, there is other birding since Arunachal Pradesh has such pristine forests. So those things need to be identified and promoted. And of course, we must ensure that there are well-trained and knowledgeable guides. Once that happens, we can offer more and more services to tourists. So let's now look at some birds from India. First of all, why India has so many species, almost 12% of the entire bird species of the world. Because we almost have varied kinds of habitats that are alike all kinds of different ecoregions in the world. So there are Trans Himalayas here in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, then Himachal Pradesh and parts of Sikkim and very few parts of Arunachal Pradesh. So there are Trans Himalayas which are beyond 3,500 meters or so. And then there are Himalayas all the way from Jammu and Kashmir to the tip of Arunachal Pradesh, some parts of Nagaland as well. There are desert in India. So there is the Thar Desert, and of course there are semi-arid regions in Gujarat and Rajasthan. Then there are Western Ghats, which are the mountain range that runs all the way from Gujarat to the tip of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. There are coasts. So the coastline that India has is extremely long, and it has all different kinds of habitats, including the Sundarban, which is the largest mangrove forest in the world. Then there is Deccan Peninsula, which is the central part of India, all the states of MP and Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh, Telangana and Chhattisgarh, Bihar, parts of UP. These are all in Deccan Peninsula. The Gangetic Plains, the rich floodplains of the rivers of like the Ganges, the Indus floodplains, and of course the Brahmaputra as well. They have similar kinds of habitats that they create with their floodplains and rich soil that they bring from the Himalayas. So they are there. There is the northeast, the Sino-Himalayan forests, uh, which are alike more or less the Southeast Asian forests and habitats, uh, and they're super rich in terms of diversity. And all of them have different hill ranges across. So the state of Assam, which is in the plains, right from Nagaland, Tripura, Mizoram, Manipur, Meghalaya, they all are extremely rich and they have their unique birds. And of course, the islands, the tropical islands that we have, the islands of Andaman and Nicobar, they are much closer to actually the Southeast Asia, but uh, they have amazing endemicity. That means the birds that are found in the islands of Andaman and Nicobar are not found anywhere else on the planet. So we have about 1335 bird species. Depending on the taxonomy, it's 1339 or even less than that. Uh, and you can see 91,000 species approximately of other organisms. There are 427 mammals. So we are basically an extremely biodiverse nation. We are also one of the top 25 biodiversity hotspots recognized in the world. Uh, then this is the protected area network. Wherever you may be living, India is one such place where wherever you may be in the entire nation, you will always have one or two protected areas close to you. It may be a wildlife sanctuary, or it may be a national park or a tiger reserve. And there are many areas. There are 104 national parks. There are uh, more than 500 wildlife sanctuaries, lots of conservation reserves and tiger reserves. And they are the hotspots for birding tourism. And of course, even apart from them, there are many reserved forests in the country, which are definite birding hotspots. So let's just look at some of these regions in detail and how they look and what the birds in there are. So here comes the most interesting part of it. So these are the Trans Himalayas, which are there, as I said, J&K, Ladakh, Himachal, and Sikkim, these states. So this is the lammergeier, the bearded vulture. You can see a tiny beard coming out from this bird's below this bird's beak. These are huge in size. The interesting thing about them is they feed on the bone marrow of. So it's a vulture, but it doesn't feed on the carcasses. What they do is they pick up the bones of animals from the ground. They fly high up and they'll drop them, and they live in these kind of rocky terrain. So when the bones they hit the rocks and crack open, they feed on the bone marrow inside it. So that's the bearded vulture. This picture is taken in Ladakh, I think around Sokar, which is a high altitude lake. Ladakh is, as you know, is a cold desert. So the bird life is uh, rich in certain areas, but the species abundance is low. That means you'll not find too many birds in one place, because it's also a very vast area. So finding birds in Ladakh is always a challenge, and yet the most amazing thing, because the birds that you see there, you usually don't get anywhere else in the country. So that's the bearded vulture. That's the ruddy shelduck, which is common even in peninsular India in the winters. But if you don't know where it goes in the summer, it goes to Ladakh. That's where it breeds. In the Pangong Tso and Sokar, that's where it breeds in the summer. So that's the ruddy shelduck. A ground tit, a very interesting bird. It has it. It used to it's also called a ground pecker, because what it how it feeds. If you can see the beak, it lives again in the dry and rocky terrain. So it pecks on the mud and finds its food. White broad tit warbler, a riot of colors, lilac, greens, and different kinds of colors. This is still in the late summer, so the bird is not exactly in its breeding glory. Um, but this is a male. The females are usually little drab in color, but you can see how beautiful this is. This is only found in the um, valleys in Ladakh. So wherever there are plains and rivers flowing, and uh, there is very peculiar plants growing by the river beds. They are usually found there. The black-necked crane, which used to be the earlier the state bird of J&K, but now they have changed, I think, to Kashmir flycatcher. Whether that has officially happened or not, I'm not sure. But this is a endangered species of crane, which is only found in India and parts of Bhutan. Then the Himalayas, very magnificent view of the Himalayas. This is just over Kashmir. This is so the Himalayas run all the way from J&K to Arunachal Pradesh, the very far tip of Arunachal Pradesh. And this is a crimson-breasted woodpecker taken again in Arunachal Pradesh in Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary. You can see that the breast has a crimson spot. This is a green-tailed sunbird. So sunbirds are often mistaken by most of us to be hummingbirds because they look so similar. But hummingbirds are only found in South America and North America, basically the New World. While what we have is sunbirds, which also feed on nectar, but they are separate from hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are not found in India. So this is a green-tailed sunbird. You can see how beautiful that is. They have these shiny metallic colors, which are actually structural colors. They don't have actual color, which is only structural. So the colors depend on how the light falls on the bird, and that's how the light gets reflected, and you'll see different kinds of colors in these birds. Again, found in the this is, I think, taken in Sikkim. Himalayan black lored tit. Uh, Lower is basically the area between the eye and the beak. So this is the Himalayan black lored tit. Tits are tiny birds which make very beautiful sounds and songs, usually found in flock of different kinds of birds. They flock together. So especially in the Himalayas and northeastern Himalayas, many birds they flock together, and that's how they feed, so that they can cover more and more area. So even if one species of bird which may be feeding in the canopy, if it misses a piece of food, it will drop down, and the next species which usually feeds in the mid canopy or the bushes, it will pick it up. And that's how they keep on feeding, and they become more and more efficient overall. This is a wall creeper, a very interesting and peculiar bird. If the wings are closed, it looks overall gray drab. But this is when the wings open, you can see this beautiful red in the wings, and it creeps on the walls vertically on the cliffs, and then it feeds on whatever it can find between the crevices. So that's how it has this very long beak that it can uh, poke into the crevices and find food. This is the cheer pheasant, um, a difficult bird to get and a very shy bird. This is only found in the cheer pine forest in Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand and parts of J&K. So very particular bird and a very beautiful one. This is a male. The female is similar looking, but with a little drab color on the face. This is the Koklas pheasant. Himalayas are very good for pheasants, uh, and but of course all pheasants are very shy and very difficult to get. So this particular bird, I just shot this last week in Uttarakhand, and I was when I was just walking up a trail, it was hiding in the bushes, and they are inquisitive birds usually. And I looked at it, it looked at me, and then I just stood still there. Then I quietly went a little further back, and I sat down by a rock, and I just kept waiting. And the bird came up after a while, and because it was inquisitive and just going around, it just kept going, crossing the road in front of me. So this is a very small, tiny trail up over a ridge, and the bird was just, I got the bird just crossing the ridge. Of course, the Himalayan monal, I think the most colorful, one of the most colorful birds that we have. This is taken in Uttarakhand in Kedarnath Wildlife Sanctuary. Um, Usually see them feeding on the ground, but sometimes they're also sitting up in the trees, especially when they roost. So this is the male. The females are much brown in color. Again, these are metallic colors, as I was telling you about the sunbird. When the light falls, the colors they keep changing in shades of blue and green and reds and oranges. A scarlet finch, again found in the Himalayas and foothills as well. Um, Mostly seen in Uttarakhand and even in the northeast in Arunachal Pradesh. Very beautiful bird. The female is yellowish in color. The males are this blood red, scarlet. Long-tailed broadbill. I always feel like this bird is wearing a helmet because of the peculiar pattern. Very beautiful bird with green and yellow and black. It's also found in the from the foothills all the way up to uh, hills as well. Then let's move on to the desert. So we finished Trans Himalayas and Himalayas. Let's move on to the desert, which is mainly found in Rajasthan and Gujarat. Great Indian bustard. The bird I told you about is critically endangered, and there may be only 300 to 500 birds individuals left in the wild. There is, of course, great effort being taken to save them from extinction. And Rajasthan in Jaisalmer, the Desert National Park is a stronghold of this species. It used to be found in Maharashtra earlier, but since last few years there have been no reports. So this is in Jaisalmer in Desert National Park. A funny thing about this bird is Dr. Salim Ali, who is the pioneer of Indian ornithology and also known as the bird man of India. He proposed this bird to be as the uh, national bird, so that this bird can receive special focus and can be saved from extinction. But just because of the name, which can be mispronounced and misunderstood, it was the peafowl was the Indian peafowl. More was chosen to be the national bird. But this is a very magnificent bird, one of the heaviest flying birds in the world. Desert courser, found only in desert conditions. There are very small populations breeding in Gujarat and Rajasthan. Rest of the populations, they migrate from different places in the Gulf and to India. Grey hypocoleus, again a migratory winter migrant, found only in Gujarat and parts of Rajasthan. Desert wheatear in the desert. So desert wheatears usually are found in the desert in the winters, but in the summers they are in the cold desert up in the Ladakh. That's where they breed. And every winter, you can imagine this is hardly a bird which is maybe about 15-20 centimeters. And every winter, when it's too cold in Ladakh, they travel all the way to peninsular India in Rajasthan, Gujarat, even Mumbai and places around it. The hoopoe lark, a very peculiar bird only found in Rajasthan and parts of Gujarat in Kutch. It breeds on the ground because, of course, there are no trees like that in the White Run or in the Run of Kutch. So it breeds on the ground. It makes a nest when the water is dried up from the run. It has a very beautiful song as well, very tinkly kind of a song. Then semi-arid regions of Punjab, Rajasthan, Haryana, Gujarat, and of course Delhi. If you, any of you are in Delhi, you can see that this almost looks similar to what you have in Aravali Biodiversity Park. So these are basically Aravalis, and they have vultures there in semi-arid regions. These are griffins, both Himalayan and Eurasian griffins. They migrate in the winters towards the southern areas from Himalayas and even beyond that. The white-necked tit, another endangered bird and also endemic bird, which is only found in India. It is found again in the semi-arid regions of Gujarat and Rajasthan, and now also reported from Haryana. Uh, Very small populations are there in parts of Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. Sociable lapwings, again an endangered bird globally. They are winter migrants to India, and you can see them in the fields in mainly in Gujarat. There have been reports of from other areas and states also, but now the stronghold is still in the state of Gujarat. Indian courser, found again in semi-arid regions throughout Deccan Peninsula as well as Gujarat and Rajasthan. So courser, because they keep running. They usually find their food by running on the ground. That's how they have very long legs. They'll find small insects as they run, and they will catch them and feed on them. Indian spotted creeper is again very peculiar to the habitats where you find these trees, which have very sort of fissured bark, and they have really large and tiny cracks all over them, and thorny trees where it can, put its beak inside and find insects and other arthropods. Demoiselle cranes. This is a congregation of demoiselle cranes in Rajasthan near a place called Falodi. They congregate in huge numbers there. Hundreds of them you can see together, feeding around 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. And generally after that they will disperse, go drink and everything. And it's a very convenient place. So if any of you want to really experience this congregation, you can just look up Falodi, and there is a small town called Kitchen there. There's also nice places to stay around there now, and it's a brilliant experience to just sit on the rooftop and watch these cranes feed as they feed um, on the ground. Variable wheatear, a black and white bird which is there in the desert. So you must have by now observed that all the desert birds are kind of drab because they have to sort of assimilate and camouflage in their surroundings, while the birds in the Himalayas were really colorful. Sykes is nightjar, a nocturnal bird. This is nightjar. This nightjar is taken in Gujarat in Run of Kutch, near Greater Run of Kutch. These nightjars, they are nocturnal, and they usually roost in shaded areas during the day, and they would take flight, and they would usually catch insects on the flight itself in the night. So that's how you can see them. They have really long bristles so that they can actually feel any insects or some things hitting them in the flight. Then the Western Ghats, very beautiful, pristine forests. This image is taken in one of the best kept national parks in India, the Eraviculam National Park. I just love this place, but this is far inside a remote part in there. And these are very peculiar, very interesting forests called sholas. So these are grasslands, and in the valleys, there are forest streams that form, and the trees only grow in these valleys. And these valleys, uh, they have very high endemicity. That means there are animals which are found there, there are birds which are found there, which are only found in these areas and nowhere else on the planet. So, in fact, there are amphibians, and there are snakes, and there are insects which are actually found on just one hill, and not anywhere, or not even the adjacent hill or other hills and things like that. So you can imagine how the evolution and adaptation has happened, and how much we can promote these kind of things where people would want to come and see something so unique about India. So this is a Vigarsis sunbird, only found from Gujarat up to Goa and very few parts of northern Karnataka. Uh, it looks like the crimson sunbird that I showed you earlier, but this is a different species now. Malabar whistling thrush. So again, Dr. Salim Ali, he very fondly called this bird as the whistling schoolboy. So because he always imagined it to be, um, a schoolboy who's after school very happily going home. On his way back, he's whistling to himself. So he called him whistling schoolboy. So it sounds like, I'll just try my best. It sounds like something like very nice, very short, slow and beautiful whistles. So it sounds like. So in the morning, if you are anywhere in the ghats, and if you in the ghats in the hills, you will hear this bird singing all the time from say about 4:30 ish or 5 o'clock, and then it'll go on until it is the sun is up, and it is much light around say 6:30 or 7 o'clock. So it keeps on singing, and you'll wake up to this bird's song in the Western Ghats. This is the Rufous babbler, again endemic to the Western Ghats, not found anywhere else in India or in the on the planet. Black and orange flycatcher, a very tiny, beautiful looking flycatcher with orange and black color. Nilgiri laughing thrush, also called the Nilgiri chillappan. Very again, these are certain laughing thrushes which are very restricted to certain areas of the Western Ghats only. So as you go on going south and south, the species will change, which are similar looking, but they are actually supposed to be different species. This is the Sri Lanka frogmouth, a very, very interesting bird. It's called frogmouth because of its looks. The face, it looks like a face of a frog. So they're called Sri Lanka frogmouth. It's again nocturnal bird. Again, it feeds like similar way where it flies and catches insects on the flight. The Deccan Peninsula, the yellow-footed green pigeon, which is the state bird of Maharashtra. It's called Harial. It's the state bird of Maharashtra. It's again found throughout almost Deccan Peninsula and other places in India also, but mostly in the plains. The forest owlet, a critically endangered bird, which is only known from very few parts of MP and Maharashtra, especially from the Melghat Tiger Reserve. And now, in last 3 years or so, they have found one particular location around Mumbai in Tansa Wildlife Sanctuary where this can be seen. The mottled wood owl, again another beautiful owl, which has all this mottled coloration because it lives in such dry teak areas full of teak plantations. It has a very eerie call, so a lot of people are afraid of it, but it's a very beautiful bird to see and hear also. The jungle bush quail, again found in dry scrub and also sort of semi-deciduous jungles. Small tiny birds live in coveys of 4 or 5 or more than that birds. Chestnut-bellied sand grouse is related to pigeons. It's a You can make out that this bird looks like a pigeon, but they're all sand grouse and they usually live in semi-arid areas. and they'll fly long distances to find food and water. And sandgrouse usually also what they do is they have special feathers around their chest, which they dip in the water and they uh, wet their feathers in the water, and that's how they feed the water to the chicks that cannot fly and come with them long distances. Rufous-tailed lark, you can see the rufous in the tail. A lark, you can make out from the beak. It's like a finch, like a sparrow's beak. The Gangetic Plains. This is the Jerden's babbler, another endangered bird only found in the Indus Plains and the Gangetic Plains, especially in Brahmaputra. Uh, so it's recorded only from the states of Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Punjab, and Nepal. Rufous-vented grass babbler, again a rarity, which is only found on the fringes of India and Pakistan border. This is a picture taken in Harike Wildlife Sanctuary where I worked briefly on the Jerden's babbler, and this bird is found in the same habitat. The marsh babbler, this is a very, very difficult bird to see because it lives in very thick reed beds. And you can always hear them singing. They are beautiful singers, but you cannot see them. Northern shoveler, a duck that flies all the way from Europe and Eurasia to India every winter. This is the male. It's called shoveler because of the shovel-like beak. Saras crane. This is taken in Bharatpur Bird Sanctuary. What you can see here is the chick, a juvenile bird that still tags along with the mother and father. Indian skimmer, a very, very interesting bird with the lower beak, which with first of all very long beak, and the lower beak is way, way longer than the upper beak. So what it does, it just flies over the water surface and skims as soon as the lower beak is put in the water, dipped in the water, and keeps flying. And as soon as something hits the lower beak, it will catch it right away. So another endangered bird, the coasts, the lesser flamingo. We have two species of flamingos, the greater and the lesser flamingo. So this is the lesser, which has a dark beak, and they feed in on the algae and other crustaceans in the water, in salty water, marine waters, and or brackish waters. And the color that you see that they get from all the things that they eat. So if you see the juvenile, so that's how you can see that some birds are more whiter than they're whiter than the other birds. So it depends on the amount of food that they have, and they get the color from the food. The greater flamingos, similar, but you can see they're much taller and with a very long neck and a different beak color. Western reef egret, these are both same birds. Uh, these are both same birds, but these are different morphs of the same species. So one is gray and the other one is a white morph. The Eurasian curlew with a very, very long beak that it puts in the mud and pulls out worms and other marine animals and feeds on them.
Saurabh, I'm only going to ask in between that how many more slides for us to go?
Just a few. I think just 6 or so.
Yeah. Okay, great. Because I've been talking a lot in between, so I think a lot of time.
Yeah. I'll just finish. So this is the crab plover, again found on the coast in brackish waters, specialized in feeding in crabs. So this is the northeastern forests from Assam to Tripura. The blood pheasant, very beautiful. This is the male, gets its name by the blood color on it. Rufous-necked hornbills, the picture we already spoke about. The Amur falcons. So the Amur falcons, what you can see here, this is the male. And what you can see here are all these falcons that migrate all the way from Amur region in northern China and southeast Russia. And they stop in India, in Nagaland and in Manipur and in Assam. And then they migrate all the way to Africa every season and all the way back. So in Nagaland, you can see such a site where this is a spectacle, it's a natural spectacle that you can witness around the time of November. where the sky gets full with millions of Amur falcons, and it's a sight to see. Slender-billed scimitar babbler, a very beautiful looking bird with very unique kind of beak. Scimitar is a sword, Japanese sword, after which it gets its name. Red-headed trogon, this is the male, very beautiful red colored. Brown parrotbill, these birds, they specialize in feeding in bamboo. So that's how they have these parrot-like bills that they scrape and break the bamboo with and feed on the shoots and insects inside. The islands, the Andaman Nicobar Islands are very interesting because they have lot of endemic birds. So this is Andaman serpent eagle, only found in the Andaman Islands. Andaman bulbul. So most of the birds that you can see in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, they're only seen in those islands, and even particular islands have their own species. This is the Andaman woodpecker, all black with a very nice red crest. Mangrove whistler, a bird specifically found in the mangroves. The Hume's hawk owl, very interesting owl. Andaman has a lot of owls, and this is the Hume's hawk owl, which is overall drab and one solid colored without any streaks or anything as such. The Nicobar jungle flycatcher, only found in Nicobars and not anywhere else, even the adjacent island systems. So thank you so much for listening to me so patiently. I hope you had a good time looking at all these birds and flying into this colorful world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. And looking at the kind of comments that we've been getting, I clearly know we need to do another one. It's been such a fascinating journey today, Saurabh, with you. It's been very different. It's unique. It's something that a lot of us don't even think about, but I'm so pleased to see the kind of inputs coming in. So thank you so much, Saurabh, for this presentation. Viewers, we are a lot out of time, but there are three things that I must mention before we leave for today. One, that you can watch the entire presentation after it's posted as a recording on the Ministry of Tourism's website. So don't lose heart if you've missed some of it. See this one and also see so many others that we've done till now. Also, with respect to the IIT-FC exam, we shall do it soon. We're extremely sorry for all the inconvenience that came out because there was a technical issue. But do share all the information that comes through these webinars. Share with your friends and family. Help us in Dekho aur Dikhao Apna Sundar Atulya Bharat. That's what we always keep saying. And so join hands with us next Saturday, 19th. We're going to take you on adventures in India. So I'm sure, Saurabh, we shall have you again because the comments that we are getting are so encouraging. And I'm sure some of us are at least going to pick our cars, drive out, keep them on the side, and go walking and do bird watching tomorrow itself. So thanks once again, viewers. Thank you, NEGD. We are going to run a short, very short, quick movie on India. And with that, we are going to say thank you to everyone.
Imagine the gleam of dawn shining on dew. And every morning brings a breathtaking view. Where the mightiest of all prosper with the tiniest of species. As you go for a walk on the wild side.
Incredible India.
So that's Incredible India. Thank you, viewers. Thank you for joining in. I'm sure a lot of us are feeling that why didn't you take question answers? I can see that on my screen right now also. Why we aren't taking viewers? We are really, really out of time. And we are going to do another session on birds in India with Saurabh and friends of his who are going to bring us beautiful memories from their travels. So tune in, join in, but do join in on the 19th. In the meantime, do keep wearing your mask, keep social distancing, keep sanitizing, keep healthy, keep safe. And we see you on 19th, 11 a.m. with some adventures in India. Namaste. Have a good weekend.